while I was hanging out in, this was right before I started my vacation. I was in Denver, Colorado, and I met a gentleman who was ex-military, and he's a trucker now. He loves it. He says he absolutely loves it. While he was overseas, he was a truck driver over there too. So he's like, it's nice to do the job and not have to worry about getting blown up. And I was just like, this job is stressful enough. I can't imagine being a trucker and all that stuff and having to worry about IEDs and random RPG attacks and stuff like that. No thanks. Anyway, so he had a cool story. I tell him about my channel and I tell him what I do, and he's like, oh, I got one for you. And I was like, awesome, lay it on me. So while he was over in Afghanistan, I forgot exactly where. He told me exactly where, but it was some weird shit I could barely pronounce. But he's hanging out with a bunch of his buddies. Now, at this point, but this was before he started driving trucks, so he was doing patrols around a base. Yeah, it was a base. So his job was to, with him and two other of his buddies, they would hop in a Humvee and they drove around the outside of this base. And their job was to keep their eyes open for insurgents and terrorists and, you know, whatever have you while they're there. Now, one thing that they didn't really talk to them about while they were there was there's a lot of critters that live out in the desert. You know, there's camel spiders and coyotes, wild dogs. You know, there's all sorts of stuff out, snakes. There's all sorts of stuff out there. While he was out there with his buddies, at one point he had to take a leak, so they pull over, and I guess he just hopped out the back of the Humvee real quick just to, you know, take a quick leak. And he swears he saw what looked like another soldier, like another American soldier. And he calls out to him. He didn't use the exact military lingo, but he basically called out to him and said, you know, hey, identify yourself. Dude just turned and looked at him, and he couldn't really see him, but he could tell by the color of the fatigues and the helmet and the goggles and the weaponry. He's like, okay, no, he's definitely one of us, but he's not responding. So he knocks on the back of the Humvee, and his patrol buddies, you know, they're like, what? And he turns around and goes, hey, you guys see this? And when he turns back, the guy's gone. He's like, dude, I just saw one of ours out here. So they back up, and they've got their searchlights out and their flashlights on their rifles out, and they're looking around, and they even go down to the nose at one point, and they're looking with the night vision, trying to see, like, they don't see anybody, they don't see anything. But one thing that he said he noticed is there were boot prints where the guy was, but he didn't see any boot prints leaving, which really kind of freaked him out. He also thought it was weird that the guy was looking, like he was up, like, staring at the wall, the outside wall of the base, just staring at the wall. There's nothing there. There's no way to look in. It's just these things that hold rocks and sandbags and stuff, and he's just like, what was he looking at? But they chalk it up to the who's he what's it's of the patrol shifts at night. I mean, security guards have the same things. Sometimes it's better to just go, that was weird, and keep pushing. Don't ask too many questions. Just, that was weird, keep pushing. So he didn't think nothing of it. He goes back in the base, and he gets comfortable, and he's going to go to sleep. And he hears some of the other guys talking about apparently a soldier went missing out of a unit. There was a bunch of guys. It was like 12 or 15 guys or something like that. They were about, like, doing a foot patrol somewhere, and they were on their way back to base, and one of the guys, just no one really noticed where he went. No one really noticed that he just was gone. Then they're all looking for him, and they're backtracking, and they're calling in air support. Like, they're doing all the stuff trying to find this guy, but he just disappeared. And they said it was the craziest thing was, like, it was so subtle. They were all in a line, marching through the rocks and the mountains and whatever. The guy in the back of the formation just disappeared. And he said that from what he gathered, from what little he could hear, they spent the better part of 2 days looking for this guy and just couldn't find him. No gear, no body, no boots, no helmet, no rifle. The whole ass dude just disappeared. Now, military guys, from what he was telling me, are a lot like truckers and security guards. You know, they got a lot of superstitions. From what they were talking about was apparently, and I don't know if it was just this one particular base or if it was a bigger thing, but there's a lot of urban legends and paranormal activity kind of stuff that they talk about out there. And in their particular base, there was a lot of talk of werewolves and spirits and, you know, vampires and all sorts of crazy stuff. But the one that was the most persistent were dogmen, dog people who, they looked like soldiers, but, you know, they were really fast and they had like canine-like claws on their fingertips and they really messed up legs, and if you scared them, they would run off at immense speed way above anything a human could do. And you know, he just was like, whatever, and he rolls over. My buddy goes to sleep and he's just like, you know, well, no big deal, whatever. But the one that really freaked him out, apart from the dogmen, was that there was like some kind of a spirit out there that would possess people and just make them wander off into the woods, and that, you know, they would wander around trying to collect more souls of fighters and warriors and other people like that. And that one kind of unsettled him, because he's a religious fellow like myself. So, you know, the werewolf thing was like whatever, but the spirits thing, the demons thing, kind of freaked him out. So the next day he's out back on patrol with his buddies in the Hummer, or Hummer, whatever, and they're driving around doing their shtick, and one of his battle buddies needs to use the bathroom, so they pull over and he hops out and he's standing in front of the Humvee and he's taking a leak. And the guy telling me the story, he's the gunner, right? So he's up there and he's looking around. They're tired. It's like 4 a.m, you know, or whatever their equivalent to 4 a.m. was over there. You know, it's early as fuck in the morning. He's tired, and he swears he sees what looks like the shape of a person standing on top of a ridge, maybe 50 feet from where he is. Now, because of what happened last night, he just immediately goes straight to night vision. And he's looking at this guy, and he tells his guys, like, hey, contact left, or whatever. And they all look over, and they all see it too. And there it is. Looks like the outline of a U.S. soldier. Again, he said the only reason you could tell it was a U.S. soldier, that really gave it away, was the stance and the helmet with the goggles up. You could see them, like you could see that he was wearing a U.S. style helmet, and you could just tell from the silhouette that it was a U.S. soldier. So they start trying to hail that person on the radio, and the guys in the base come back and they're like, who are you talking to? He was using a lot more military terminology. I'm trying to keep it straight and simple for those of you who may not have friends in the military or anything like that. But the base basically comes back and asks them, like, who are you guys talking to? And they're like, there's a guy out here, this side, this ridge, this far off. He's not responding to the radio calls. And something that really freaked all three of them out was, while they were talking to base, an unknown fourth voice outside of the 3 patrol guys responded with, I think he said like Sergeant something McAllister or whatever. I think he said something like that. And they're like, you know, hey, he said he's Sergeant McAllister. Do you guys know of a Sergeant McAllister? And immediately someone from the base told them to get back inside immediately. Get back in the base immediately. And they're like, what about him? They're like, leave him alone and get back to base immediately. So they leave him. They hop back in the Hummer and they take off. They get back inside and they're like, so what's the deal? And they're just like, they lock down the whole base, like high alert. So they're thinking there's a mortar strikes are inbound, or there's enemies outside gonna pop off a bunch of RPGs in their direction or something. They don't know, but they're assuming that they're about to be under attack, and they're like, hey, that guy's still out there, and they're like, we know. And so they go up to their higher ups, and they're like, we left our guy out there. And they're like, yeah, that guy that went missing. And he basically tells them the same story of what my friend heard. He's like, you know, what story? And they're like, oh yeah, we had a formation out there like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and one of the guys just disappeared. He's like, oh yeah, I heard about that. It was Sergeant McAllister. That's the guy that went. They're like, well, then shouldn't we go get him? And they're like, it's not McAllister. And so his friends are like, well, then who the fuck is it? And they're like, it's what looks like Sergeant McAllister, but it's not Sergeant McAllister. Sergeant McAllister's dead. Very dead. Been out in the desert for 3 weeks, dead. So they don't know what to think. They don't know how to act. They're just like, what the fuck? Okay. So why are we locked down? And they're like, because he's out there. And they're like, so we're not under attack by Taliban or ISIS or whatever the fuck? Like, there's no mortars coming? Like, but what? You're locking down the whole base for a guy? And they're like, we don't understand. We don't know who that is or what they're capable of. So the higher-ups basically told us that if we see them, to lock it down. And they're like, why would we lock down an entire military base of like 8,000 guys for one dude? But they followed orders, and they didn't ask too many questions, and the higher-up basically told them, like, just forget about it, just do what you're told, kind of thing. Now, about 4 days after that happened, my friend telling me the story, he was up on the wall, just walking back and forth, again, just keeping his eyes open, looking out into the desert. And about middle of the night, he swears that he saw this soldier not too far off in the distance, maybe 20, 30 feet, but he was on a ledge that made him kind of level with the wall, but it was really far away, but he was the same height. So he flips open his nods this time, and he's like looking at the guy, and he like zooms in, and he's telling him on the radio, like, hey, I see someone. And he said something that sent a shiver down his spine and freaked him out was this time when he focused on the guy with the night vision and he actually saw him. He said his eyes were glowing, like bright, like no pupils, no iris, just glowing white eyes. Now, that's not too uncommon. It can happen with night vision, but he said this was different. He said this was like an animal. Like if you look at a dog or a cat, the way their eyes reflected with the light, that's what it looked like. It wasn't your typical, you know, like when you look at someone's eyes in night vision, they don't glow. This thing's eyes were like just two glowing orbs off in the distance. And he called it in, and the base went into lockdown again. And he said that was an on and off thing for months. And they had a code word for it and all sorts of crazy shit. And he said it freaked him out. It was the longest time he ever felt like he was stationed anywhere. It scared him to death. And everybody was whacked out scared of Sergeant McAllister's spirit or whatever. And what really freaked all of them out was that it wasn't just like a local, you know, the boys are making up superstitions things. This guy had been seen multiple times. His eyes are glowing, which is not natural, and the higher ups are freaking out about it too. And they're shutting down the whole base every time they see this one guy. So he said that he never found out any information. Nobody would talk about it. The most he ever found out was that this guy apparently went missing during a patrol, and no one knows how he went missing. He literally just fell off the back of the fucking formation, and no one knew where he went. No one knew nothing. And 3 weeks after he went missing, he started showing up back at base on the outside, and he was always outside the west wall, facing east, just staring at the wall. And he'd be different distances apart, 30 feet, 50 feet, 60 feet away from the wall, but he was always facing the same wall. So there were speculations that he was killed by his own men out about, and he was haunting them. There was some people saying that he was a vampire and that he couldn't come into base as long as he wasn't invited. But one of the things that really solidified how horrifying the whole ordeal was is the last time he encountered Sergeant McAllister. He was on patrol in the Hummer with the guys again, and they stopped for something. I forgot what he said he stopped for. They stopped for something, and while he was doing something, I don't know if he was taking a leak or he was, checking out something in the bushes or whatever, but he swears, not in his earpiece, he felt the air on the back of his neck. He felt someone call his name, like whisper his name, like right behind him. And he felt the little bit of wind touch the back of his neck, and he turned real quick and there was nothing there. But off in the distance, there was the silhouette again. There was Sergeant McAllister. So he felt something whisper, say his name on the back of his neck, and he turned around and he said not 25, 30 feet out was just the silhouette of him, and it was staring right at him. And he said at that point he was desperate to get out of there. He didn't care if he had to get a dishonorable discharge. He wanted out of that base. Luckily, he got to go home for a while, and when he finally did come back, he went to, I guess, a different location. So I don't know, but he basically he got to go home for like 3 weeks, and then he didn't have to, 2 or 3 weeks, I forgot, but he got to go home for a while, and when he went back out, he was in a different location. But he bumped into guys who were at that base, and all of them knew about Sergeant McAllister. They don't know. I asked them if they had like a catchy thing, and everyone just called him Sergeant McAllister, and everyone just knew. Some of them called him Phantom McAllister, but no one. That's the other creepy thing too, is no one really knew what he was. You know what I mean? Like, some people were deadpan set on he was a vampire. Other people were deadpan set that he had been possessed by some kind of desert demon. You know what I mean? Everyone had their own theories as to what was going on with him. But I just think it's so creepy, though, that this guy's just out in the desert wearing Why were the higher-ups so afraid of addressing this thing? You know what I mean? They were terrified of... Like, they never sent anyone out there to confront him. They never sent anyone out there to go get him or retrieve him or even shoot at him. Nothing. It's like as soon as they found out that he was outside the wall, they locked everything up, at least on one side or the whole base. And that's crazy to me, that a base with 5,000 to 8,000 guys, they locked down a whole base because there's one dude outside the walls. And why always that wall? Why always facing that way? I don't know. The whole thing is just freaking eerie. And if you're watching this while you're driving, if you're listening to this while you're driving, please drive safe. And if you're watching this while you're driving, watch out for the deer.